I actually wasn't even sure that this was ever going to be performed. And I wrote it. It took me so long to write it because every time I started it, I think I did the first draft of a scene in about 1989. I can remember 1989, that's right. And then I got a commission, and I put the thing aside. I got a commission for Samsara, an orchestral piece that I wrote, and that took me, a year to plan and do. And so I came back to the opera then in the early 90s, but then other things took over, and I had to. Basically, I didn't have the space, financial or otherwise, to complete the thing. And this kept on happening. And every time I would come back to it, I would have rethought my either melodic lines, or I'd have had a better idea, or so I ended up never completing it, or never getting further than a draft or two of a scene or two, until I decided that what I would have to do would give myself a deadline, and the only way I could do that would be to maybe submit it as a doctorate. And so I went to appropriately enough the National University of Ireland in Maynooth, which is right beside Maynooth Castle, and that was very atmospheric, I must say, because every time I went in, you could see the castle there on your right, and the ghost of Thomas stood up. Yeah, I had to take it from the actual characters, the dialogue that the librettist had given the characters themselves. Well, first of all, Thomas needed to be a fairly stalwart, rigid tempo, because he wasn't the headstrong, ignorant, ill-tempered, unthinking, rushing into things person that history has given us. Because the history that we get that from is a history that was written by Stanihurst, which was commissioned by Gerald, the 11th Earl. And what Gerald wanted to show was that the Fitzgeralds have always been loyal to the king, and Thomas was the black sheep. So he commissioned this history which showed Thomas as being headstrong and ill-tempered and unthinking and rushing into things. And that's the way he's come down to us, but actually he wasn't like that. So Thomas needed a fairly strict tempo, so I gave him 72, okay? And Frances, his wife, English, she's a flighty little thing, so she moves at twice the speed, 144, very fast, like a flutter. There's Janet Eustace, who's very sympathetic towards Thomas. Her tempo is 108, so there's a 4-3 relationship between her and Thomas. Christopher Paris, who's the foster brother of Thomas, who's the person who actually betrays the dynasty, opens the doors of Maynooth Castle and allows the English in, allowing the capture of Dame Janet and ultimately the fall of Maynooth Castle and Thomas, the failure of the rebellion. That needed to be a tempo that was close to Thomas's, but not so close that it was harmonious, so that's a 7-6 ratio. He's at quarter 84. And so on and so on. That's the way I worked it. So characters who are empathetic with each other have nice, fairly simple, harmonious, if you like, relationships with each other. The very first meeting that I had with John in the Alliance Française, the cafe there, we discussed conductors, and I vainly thought maybe I could do this, but no, actually John said, what about Fergus Shield? And I said, actually Fergus would be very good. And Fergus, I have to say, has been absolutely fantastic. I didn't realise that there's so much more to conducting than just waving your hands about, and Fergus has that. He's got a very cool, controlled approach. He knows the score backwards, which is very impressive. And not only that, but he can conduct in 5/4 at crotchet 120 and sing somebody's line who's missing at in 3/4 at Quad 72, which is, while he's conducting, it's very impressive, I must say. The Arts Council, the grant which they got was this, I think, the Special Projects grant. They got a huge amount. It wasn't enough for a full production, but it was enough for this workshop production. And Opera Ireland rode in behind it, which was even better, because then we had all of the administration and whatever these companies do. I don't really know. I'm not familiar with the actual workings of it. But I suppose the advertising, the administration, the mailing listing, the actual advice. I think what was very important for John in Living Opera was to have support and advice from Dieter and Niall in Opera Ireland, and I think that was very, very important, and that's been a huge help, I think. I'm confident that the orchestrations are sufficiently separate from the opera itself. I mean, they are standalone pieces, and this production is just it's a piano production, so it's not actually eclipsing RTE's performance rights. So yeah, what you hear on the 27th are 3 pieces which are reworked extracts of music from the opera, reworked in the sense that they're orchestrated much larger than the opera was ever going to be orchestrated. I was only going to use a chamber opera for the orchestra, and these are the full symphonic forces. And a lot of music has been reordered